It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy the grind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, first time in the host chair after Kyle has departed us, and he's off to better thing, or not better things, but other stuff. And but I've got a couple guests. I've got Devin, always on the panel here, and then an OG of this show, Tony Wolak, coming back for our first episode post Kyle. So first of all, Tony, how's it going? Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's going well. I originally took time off to kind of adjust to dad life, and now that we're in a routine and things are going well, I'm finding myself with a little bit of free time, and what better way to spend it than with you guys?
Well, always happy to have you on the show, right? So, and Devin, of course, always the line mate on the show. How's it going?
It's good. It's going good. I got you with me, of course, Matt. I've got Tony back. I feel like it's late 2020 again in a weird way. So I'm feeling pretty good.
There you go. So, but before we get going, this show is brought to you by the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia. Have you ever been looking for details on a player just competed at the World Junior Championship? Do you want to know who owns the New York Islanders? Who was in the 2015 Stanley Cup playoffs? What about awards? What's their history? If you're interested in any of these or other hockey questions, make sure you're checking out and bookmarking the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia, ever-growing collection of hockey resources invaluable to any fan looking for information. Look for a link in the show description and dive in today. All right, well, that's out of the way. Let's get going on the show, I'm not taking this segment away. We're going to do our one good, one bad, as we always do. And we'll start with our guest here, Tony. What's a one good, one bad from the last week?
For the good, Filip Zadina is back. I am fully on Team Zadina, and I'm glad to see him back in the lineup for Grand Rapids on his conditioning stint. It's been a while since he saw game action, but he's getting closer to returning to the Red Wings lineup, and today was a step in the right direction. As for bad, I said before the show that I hadn't watched the skills competition. I did tune in very, very briefly, just enough time to see Dylan Larkin wearing the reverse retro and immediately turn the TV off. So,
yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, the skills competition, you can go on a whole rant about what they're adding, what they're not. I mean, it's just a gimmick at this point. I mean, they just keep adding some stuff to kind of maybe make it more fun for fans to watch, for the players to be there and do. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that they keep doing at the All-Star weekend. All right, over to you, Devin. What's a good and a bad from the past week?
At this point with the skills competition, I think they just got to start fully embracing it and start making drinking games out of it or something. The losing team has to take a bunch of shots or something, because at this point we know what the deal is. My one good, I'm actually going to kind of elaborate and bounce off of Tony's one good. Not only is Zadina back, he was assigned to Grand Rapids on a conditioning stint, but he is slated to, and in fact, they're playing right now. So he is playing alongside Jakub Vrana. They're line mates again. The old checkmates are back together. If you would have told me, 6 months ago that they'd be on a line together in Grand Rapids, I would have been like, "Oh, what's happening?" But yeah, I'm excited for both of them. They've, they showed great chemistry in the NHL, so I'm sure that will translate at the AHL level. And I'm like Tony, I'm excited to see Zadina get going and hopefully kind of turn the page and have a fresh start in Detroit, because Lord knows he could use it. And then my one bad, I'm just going to be super generic here. It's been a minute since we've had actual Red Wings hockey. It was nice to see Larkin on the TV during the skills competition. But man, I would like to see him and the rest of his teammates playing, because like I said, it's been a minute. So I am missing Red Wings hockey. It cannot come back soon enough.
Yeah, I'll go with that same vein. I'll start with the bad, because hockey has been there's not really anything,
Mhm.
hockey in the last few days because of the All-Star break, which is always happening. But and then trade rumors galore. I mean, that's the good. So the good is our trade rumors, and that's always fun to write about, always fun to follow. Even though, I mean, there's some players that get traded that you probably don't want to be traded if you're a fan of the team. And then others that do get traded that you would love that they're gone. So it's interesting time of year. Here in Canuckland, you got Bo Horvat on the move, and we'll talk about him later on in the show. But it's a fun time to be a fan, fun time to be a writer, and just so much changes that could be happening in the next month or so. So on that note, let's talk about the trade deadline. It is a month away today as we're recording this, February 3rd. March 3rd is the trade deadline. So we're actually a month from that happening. So at this time next month, we'll be talking about whatever trades happen on trade deadline day. So starting with you, Tony, what players on the Red Wings could be on the move? I mean, they're pretty much sellers at this point, I would say, unless you think that they could go on a crazy run and make the playoffs. I don't think that's happening. But who do you see as one player that could be on the move within the next month before the deadline here?
Well, yeah, I think that there could be several players gone within the next month. I would probably set the under over at 2.5 if I was a betting man. But I'll go with someone who, I think Devin and I might be on the same page about, but I think Tyler Bertuzzi might be nearing his end in Detroit. He's a pending unrestricted free agent, as most know, and as most know as well, he has missed a significant amount of time this season. The Red Wings have shown they could play without him, and while the team's gone a little bit downhill as of late, it's been a better season than the year before and the year before that and the year before that. So they are making progress. There is a bit of a conundrum here. Bertuzzi has missed a lot of time, and when he's been in the lineup, he hasn't been very great. Only 5 points in 17 games. So that's definitely taken a toll on his trade value. Now, someone who plays in Detroit's top six is, normally is a valued member of the team, coming off of a 30-goal, 62-point campaign last year. You probably want to get some significant assets in return for a player like him. The issue, of course, is that, since he hasn't played and hasn't played well when he's been in the lineup, teams probably aren't going to want to pay top dollar for an underperforming top six player who is more than likely going to play in their bottom six in the playoffs, given how things have gone so far. He's not a great skater. He's more of a mucker around the net. There's, a little bit of skill to his game. Definitely a complimentary player, next to, a quality center. But I took an informal poll around, with a few writers whose teams I think might be interested in a player like Bertuzzi, not necessarily him, but a player like Bertuzzi at the trade deadline. And the common consensus there was that maybe a second round pick, a decent prospect, but not an elite prospect, would be, adequate returns in their opinion. Obviously, everyone favors their own picks and prospects over those on the outside or players on the outside. But if the Red Wings can only get a second round pick for Tyler Bertuzzi, that's kind of unfortunate. And it's a conundrum because his trade value is so low that it may not be worthwhile to trade him. But also, since he's an unrestricted free agent, then obviously if they're not going to sign him, they want to get something for him in return. And with him performing so poorly, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to sign him to a long-term lucrative contract that he would have gotten last year with a 30-goal season. But it's going to be an interesting month to watch and see how he performs after the All-Star break leading up to the trade deadline for sure. Devin, how about you?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree that Bertuzzi is kind of like the name to watch here. It's going to be interesting because, like you said, um, if they were shopping him last year, they would have gotten a heftier return than what they are kind of looking at this year. It's almost kind of a you wish you could rewind time, because that he would have fetched at least a first last year, and this year it's if they get a first, that means that there was a big market for him, because I don't know that that's I certainly don't think that's a given right now. I think that I liked your 2.5 as a yeah, kind of a benchmark for moves. I kind of wonder if Yzerman is going to. I wonder how busy he's going to be, because you look at the team. There's a lot of pending free agents. That's usually the usual suspects when it comes to teams selling off assets. But then also, would it shock you if he traded to David Perron, even though he's got a year left in his deal? Would it shock you if he traded Dominic Kubalik if like the right offer came his way? We're talking about the GM who traded Anthony Mantha 5 or 6 months after he signed into a 4-year deal. So
Yeah.
I think darn near everything is on the table. I think that it's just going to come down to what, because obviously the intention is going to be for the Red Wings to be competitive next year. He doesn't want to completely tear it down to the point where they're back to the basement next year. But also, I don't think he's going to look a gift horse in the mouth when it comes to good offers. So for me, that's kind of what I'm looking at is, there's the obvious ones you can maybe expect to expect to see dealt, but I'm curious how active Yzerman will be, because I think there will be there's more than 2 or 3 players that should garner interest, and it'll just depend on what he can get for those players.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, not just for the Red Wings, but for all the teams, because there's only been one big trade. I mean, the Horvat trade's been the only one so far. So it'll be interesting to see where that kind of goes from there, because the Red Wings, like you said, do have Bertuzzi as being a pretty, I mean, like you said, it's not, his trade value isn't high, but he is a pretty big piece for some teams that may think, he could be something for him, right? So
he's the type of player, again, this even goes back to, like, I wish this was last year, because he's the type of player that plays playoff hockey. Point blank. That's what he does. That's what he won the playoff MVP in 2017 when the Griffins won the Calder Cup. I think that's, a testament to the type of game he plays. I think that whether he's a bottom 6 player on a cup contender, a middle 6 or whatever, I think he's going to be a player that if he does get traded, his new team's going to love him, because he plays that game. He's going to go to the dirty areas. He's going to score ugly goals. But then he also has the skill to do some stuff where it's like, oh, this dude isn't just like beating people up. He can make some moves. So, and that's why, again, last year would have been the best year to move him, because he was, everything was clicking. Everything was coming together. He had 30 goals. He had 60 plus points, but, and that player's still there. I think it's just, this is like the worst possible time for him to have like the worst injury luck of his career.
Yeah.
You never want to sell low, and it's unfortunate with how the season played out, but you got to think that if the Red Wings do trade him, he's a prime candidate to break out in the playoffs and land himself a huge contract.
For sure. Absolutely. I'm actually curious. Do you think there's a chance the Red Wings actually re-sign him, kind of capitalizing on his low value right now? Because his asking price probably isn't what it would have been last year.
I've been thinking about that. And, quick tangent. When Emmett was first born, I was up a lot of the night with him, and I put together a contract model. What it spit out for Tyler Bertuzzi based on last season's stats was 6 years, $6.17 million. Which is pretty reasonable for 30 goal scoring, 62 point top 6 winger, with Valeri Nichushkin and Zach Hyman as comparables there. I don't think that. I mean, I don't think you can expect that now after how the season's gone, and I understand it's pretty bad luck getting 2 broken hands just trying to block shots, or even just get out of the way of your own defenseman shooting, for that matter. I would say probably I could see the term coming down a little bit more significantly than the actual cap hit. maybe 3 times 5, maybe. Yzerman has shown that he's okay with signing someone for not a max contract, as they're approaching unrestricted free agency. So I think that he could probably get by with a 3 times 5 at this point for Bertuzzi because just of how low his value has dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the contract is definitely not going to be the same as what he after last season because he can't demand that. But yeah, he's still relatively young. It's not like he's over the hill or at all. So he will get paid in free agency. I think. It just happens. You pay for that type of player, and it'll be interesting to see if the Red Wings are the ones that re-sign him or they just let him go in free agency. But like you said before, you don't want to let him go for nothing. If he's not going to re-sign, if you can't you're not going to re-sign him. You want at least something for him, even if it is a 2nd round pick. You're getting something, especially in this draft. If it's a 2023 one, the 2nd round is as good as a 1st at this point, right? So you even get that. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting that next month because, like I said, the Red Wings could potentially make some interesting moves. Yzerman has done it in the past with trading guys, so we'll see what happens. All right. Well, that's talk about trade deadline. Let's go on to our first off the rush question here. And I'm going to stick to the trade deadline, and I'll start with you, Devin, on this one. What is one surprising trade that you could see Steve Yzerman making before the deadline? One that would just come out of left field that no one would expect.
You're gonna put me on the spot with this. Come on now. I could see a player like Kubalik being traded to like the Lightning for like Isaac Howard or some crazy prospect like that. Like, so Lightning wouldn't have a lot to give in the first place, but I kind of think of like the Brandon Hagel trade where like he was signed to a really good deal and he had term on his deal left. And so a team like the Lightning could see value in Kubalik performing the way he has this season and still having another year left of his deal with at $2.5 million. So something like that. Maybe not the Lightning specifically, but something like that.
I could see that. I could see the Lightning being a trade partner, especially with his familiarity with the system, right? Mm-hmm. Tony, what do you think? Surprising deal that Yzerman could make that no one would expect.
First of all, I'm thankful you gave me a minute to actually think about this, and like that. Thank you for putting me on the spot. But I don't know if this is out of left field, but I could definitely see Yzerman going after a player who I guess has a little bit of term on his contract and maybe a higher cap hit than a team is willing to live with, and is trying to bolster their roster. And just taking that player back in a deal, like he did last year with in the Nick Leddy trade where he got back Oscar Sundqvist and Jake Walman. I guess one player who came to mind for me earlier this week is Dennis Gurianov of the Dallas Stars. I think he's making $2.9 million this year, something around that, and just has not produced to that degree whatsoever. And that's a potential destination for Tyler Bertuzzi. And if we're taking back a quote unquote bad salary in return, Gurianov, that, may garner the Red Wings a first round pick after all.
Even like, I forget what his number was at the time, but Sam Gagne in the Andreas Athanasiou deal, that was kind of a salary move that also ended up being, he was with the Red Wings for another 2 seasons. So
yeah.
Local legend. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'll throw one in here, and I think Yzerman could potentially trade Perron. I could see that happening depending on. Teams are going to ask. They'll call him. They'll ask because he's a playoff guy, right? So
if the Blues were like in a playoff spot, I would already be like, I'd bet my house on it. There's no way.
There you go. All right. Well, next question. Let's start with you, Tony, on this one. Will Dylan Larkin be re-signed before the trade deadline? And if he is, what's the AAV?
No, before the trade. It won't be before the trade deadline, but I'll say 8.55 million for his AAV across 8 years.
There you go. All right, Devin, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it gets done before the deadline. I think this is going to be like a Stamkos situation where it goes down to the wire, but it does get done. I do think 8.5 in that area is where it's going to land.
There we go. All right. Well, that's our first off the rush. Before we move on, this is the Grind Line presented by the Hockey Writers, and we're talking Red Wings hockey. And we've got Tony here, we got Devin, but before we move on, make sure you're checking out our Hockey Writers Hockeypedia page. Lots of great stuff there. We keep adding to it every day. History, we got stats, we got profiles, we got a whole bunch of stuff for the draft coming up. So make sure you're checking out the Hockey Writers Hockeypedia. That's just ever-growing collection of stuff that we keep just adding every day to the hockeywriters.com. All right, well, let's move on to the second half of our show and talk about a trade that just happened it was just a few days ago. Bo Horvat was traded to the New York Islanders from the Vancouver Canucks, a trade that was not expected. I mean, I don't think anyone had the Islanders on their bingo card when they were saying where Horvat was going to go. But as we all know, he was rumored to be in Detroit Red Wings wheelhouse here of a potential trade target. Starting with you, Tony, what do you think a comparable offer would have been to the trade that did go down, which was first round pick, which could potentially be 2023 or 2024. Aatu Räty, top prospect, and Anthony Beauvillier, roster player, 25-year-old. So what do you think those three pieces would be in relation to the Red Wings if they were offering something to the Canucks?
If the Red Wings had offered a comparable deal, I would, and kind of fitting in with the players and picks that the Islanders sent to the Canucks, I would have to guess it would probably be like Robbie Fabry, Michael Rasmussen, and a conditional first round pick like the Islanders did, which in the Red Wings case would almost pretty sure it would be moved to 2024 since it was a top 12 protected pick, and then move to the next year if it was within the top 12. That's roughly the same. Anthony Beauvillier hadn't had a great season so far, and it's not that Fabry hasn't had a great season. He's actually been pretty good since he's rejoined the lineup. He just missed most of the year with the torn ACL, and I think Rasmussen kind of fits the type of player that Jim Rutherford likes, and would have probably fit into his picture for the future of Vancouver well. But I'm glad we get to keep him. And before I pass over to Devin, can I just say this was like the most like early 2000s trade I've seen in a long time. Like whoever deals for a pending unrestricted free agent, 30 goal scorer, deals like a middle of the lineup player, a top prospect, first round pick, like it's nothing. Like that is so. It reminded me of when the Red Wings traded for Robert Lang back in the day. It was like the almost exact same type of trade.
Good call out.
This is throwing it back here. Thanks, Lou.
Good stuff.
All right, Devin. Now, what did you think about the trade? What do you think the Red Wings have been a comparable offer? Do you agree with Tony that it's Rasmussen, Fabry, that first round pick, or do you have someone else in mind?
I think I mostly agree. I think the only thing I would maybe debate is whether or not Vancouver really wanted like a prospect, because Rasmussen and Fabry, those are both established NHL players now. True. Obviously, Ras is younger than Fabry, but they're both like they're NHLers at this point. They're not prospects. So I would almost wonder if you'd swap out Fabry, probably because he's the older one, with like a Carter Mazer or something like that. Very good forward prospect. So I feel like Kasper would have been a no-go for the Red Wings. Like that just wouldn't have happened. But like Carter Mazer, second best forward prospect, depending on who you ask. If you're asking me, he is. I think that's where like a deal maybe could have done, but even then it wouldn't have made sense for the Red Wings to do it. And this is kind of the point I want to make with this. I think that no matter who made the deal with Vancouver, I think this is more or less what the deal was going to look like. It just depended on who was going to pay the price. And that's why it never really made sense for me, or to me at least, why the Red Wings were in the mix for this, because it was always going to cost a first round pick. It was always going to cost at least a really good young player. And those are both things that the Red Wings need to be adding, not shipping out. Now, I think there's a decent argument to be made that, Horvat would, that would have definitely made the Red Wings better and maybe puts them back in that playoff conversation. But at the end of the day, with where they are right now, it's just not the time to be making deals like that. I would even argue that the Islanders shouldn't have done that, but Lou Lamoriello is going to Lou Lamoriello. So I will say, to kind of take the Red Wings hat off real quick. I'm personally kind of excited for your Canucks there, Matt, because I actually think your team got some good value out of that deal. That first round pick is probably going to be a good one because the Islanders aren't that great. We'll see how they look with Horvat, but I'm not betting on them to go deep even next year. And then Ratu, Steele in the second round. I think he's a first round caliber prospect. I don't know how good he's going to be, but I think he's a very, very solid prospect to add. And then Beauvillier, even if he's just like a tweener, bottom sixer, still a young piece you can have for the next 10 years. So I think that the Canucks got good value for given the circumstance they were in and the situation. And I think that the Red Wings did well to not match the Islanders' offer.
I agree with that, Carter Mazur. I think he's probably the comparable for me as well. I mean, I would have loved Kasper, but I think he's a bit of more of a high-end guy that I don't think the Red Wings were thinking of trading anyway.
Yeah.
Tony, are you happy with the deal that they didn't make? Or do you think that they should have gone for someone like Horvat?
I mean, if Horvat had term on his contract, or expressed like a willingness to agree to a deal before the trade went down, yeah, sure, that would have been nice. It would have given the Red Wings an adequate second line center to play behind Dylan Larkin. Andrew Kopp's just not that guy, and I would have been fine with the trade, on those conditions. But otherwise, like, no harm, no foul. He'll be available this summer, and the Red Wings can make an offer if they're still interested.
True. Yeah, it's not a guarantee that that he's going to re-sign with the Islanders either, which is a gamble when you go and spend that much and not knowing that you're going to have the guy next year, right? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Islanders do with Horvat. I think ultimately the Canucks weren't going to be able to re-sign him, so it was great that they actually got something for him. They've left so much on the table in the past where they just let guys go to free agency and lost out. So I mean, it's great that they got something for a guy that probably wasn't going to be in Vancouver next year. So, and I'm happy with the trade. I think Ratu was a great prospect. I loved Ratu before as a prospect, so I'm happy now he's in the Canucks system. Got two blue chip prospects I can talk about now. And probably four after next, because they're going to have two more coming in this first round. Unless they get more, I mean, there's more trades to be had. Well, on that note, let's talk about Detroit buying at the trade deadline. I mean, we talked about Horvat being potentially, we're not sure that he was actually on their radar. I mean, there were talks that he could have been, but we'll start with you, Tony. Do you think they're in a position to buy? Do you think, like we said, they're going to be sellers, but could they actually get a player like a Horvat, like a Timo Meier, those types of guys coming up?
For this year's trade deadline, I don't see them being buyers in a significant manner like that for Timo Meier or Jacob Chikrin or, whoever, over the next month. There's just, when the trade deadline is coming up, you have to figure all the teams who are scrambling for those playoff spots are willing to pay a little extra to get the last piece that they think they need to make a playoff push and go deep and go for a chance at the Stanley Cup. And I don't think it'd be wise for the Red Wings to compete in that sort of market. They might buy in the sense of like looking for value deals, like I mentioned before with Gurrianov. But otherwise, probably not buyers, over the next month. I will say though that I fully expect there to be a significant trade this summer. It's the rebuild's been going on for quite some time now. Steve Yzerman, committed to putting together a competitive roster last summer. It went well for a little bit of time, and then the wheels kind of fell off a little bit. But I think we're getting to the point where most of the pieces are in place, and it's time to get that one last solid piece in a significant trade. And I can see that happening closer to the draft or sometime over the summer.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Red Wings shouldn't be doing too much now. I mean, it's, the prices are just astronomical for buyers. I mean, sellers, you're going to get a lot. I think this trade deadline for me. I think we're not sure. I mean, Horvat's been the only one, but I think it set a precedent to me.
It did, yeah.
All right, Devin, well, over to you. What do you think? Are the Red Wings in a position to buy? Do you think they should buy?
Yeah, I kind of like Tony's example of like Gurianov. I think another guy that maybe fits a buy for them would be Jesse Puljujarvi over in Edmonton. Basically somebody who's still young and maybe basically just needs a fresh start, right? That maybe would cost some assets, but not like, not a Bo Horvat type of return where you're giving up a first and a quality prospect. Puljujarvi, you can probably get for like a second round pick and call it good. So if like you trade Tyler Bertuzzi for a second round pick and then you trade that second round pick to Edmonton for Puljujarvi, you basically traded Bertuzzi for Puljujarvi. But that's the type of thing I could see them doing where they're still adding to their roster, but not in a huge way where it actually like costs them future assets. I think that the Red Wings should actually seriously consider looking into the Gurianovs, the Puljujarvis, players of that mold that just need that fresh start and have shown well for themselves. Nichushkin's like the prime example of this because of what he did over the last couple of years with the Avalanche, where he was a top 10 pick. I'm pretty sure he was 10th overall when he went. He did not do well at Dallas. He went over to the KHL, then came back and had 0 goals. And it was basically a forgotten person at that point. It was written off. And then he goes to Colorado, and within 2-3 years, he's the player that Dallas drafted him to be. So those players are out there. It happens. I think the Red Wings would be wise to see if Nichushkin 2.0 is out there. A lot of people point to Puljujarvi as that potential guy. So I don't know if they'll go out of their way to get that guy, but I think if the opportunity is there and it makes sense for them, I think that's the type of buying that Detroit could do.
Do you think a player like Nick Schmaltz, Devin, would be a good fit in that?
Michael DeRosa, are we plugging your article right now? Anyways, what's funny about that is actually like there are some stuff out there that I think is super far-fetched, and I actually wouldn't spend a whole lot of brain cells on it. And that's one that I actually think has some backing that I think I could get behind. He did play for Lalonde 10 years ago at this point. He is kind of a sneaky good player that's a little under the radar. He's got term on his deal. Plays for he's just underappreciated because of where he plays. Yeah. I think it just depends on what they would have to send to Arizona, because I actually, like, if I had to choose, a week ago for them to go after Bo Horvat or Nick Schmaltz, I would tell them to go after Nick Schmaltz. So, I wouldn't write off that idea. I wouldn't, place a bet on it or anything, but I think that's the type, if they're going to like go big and buy big, I think that's the type of player that they should go after.
I think that might be a great idea if the deal's there, and if we're giving our teammates some love, I'll plug one of Delaney's articles about our top college hockey players and potentially prospects.
I know you're going with this.
Such a deal.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's going to be interesting. One more question though, before we get to our off the rush questions, maybe this is a little bonus one. Do you see them going at the Canucks for anyone else other than Horvat? Because the Canucks have Brock Besser, Connor Garland actually on there. You got defensemen like Tyler Myers, maybe a bit too pricey to kind of grab, but Do you see anyone else that the Red Wings could actually be interested in?
Who goes first?
Whoever wants first.
Come on, Devin.
I'll go first. I think the answer to this question, I think in order to answer this question, I need to get some information from you, Matt, since you are the Canucks guy on this this panel. I think that there are players that would be of interest, but they're players that are young, and they're players that I would assume Vancouver would want to hold on to. Like I could see Hoglander being a player that they go after. I could see them putting together a package to try to convince Vancouver to move Pettersson. I don't think they do it because Pettersson's kind of the player that they're building around at this point. But like I think that for Vancouver, I think the Red Wings, anybody who's left, it would be a big swing type of thing where maybe they want to go after Quinn Hughes, maybe they want to go after Pettersson, and they would have to give up a lot to do it. But if you're getting a player of that magnitude and that quality, you pay that price because they're hard to come by. I kind of cringed at the thought of paying a first-round pick for Bo Horvat. They would have to give up like 2 first-round picks and like Simon Edvinsson and probably even another good piece too to get a hold of Pettersson. But if they get Pettersson, it's worth it.
I can see it. I can see Hoglander being a guy that could potentially be moved. He's kind of, I don't know if he's a management, the way the management, I don't think he's their guy. But now that Rick Tockett's in charge behind the bench, that may actually change because it looked like he wasn't Boudreau's guy. So we'll see when he gets in the lineup because he probably will before the end of the season now, especially with some more trades. I mean, if Besser goes, Garland goes, we're going to have Canucks will see those guys in the lineup towards the end of the season. So, Tony, what do you think? Do you see the Red Wings going after anyone on the Canucks other than the big guys like Pettersson and Hughes, which I think every team would try?
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. I will say that Jake Wallman has been outstanding next to Moritz Seider. I think Quinn Hughes next to Moritz Seider would be incredible.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Phenomenal. And I mean, he's a Michigan guy, right? You know,
yeah. You could right the wrongs of the
I still don't get how they didn't pick him. That's why during that draft, as a quick side note, when I was watching that draft, I'm like, Red Wings will pick him. I mean, I was already anticipating the next guys to look at.
You were thinking about pick 7 already.
I'm like, yeah, Hughes is the Red Wings coming up. Hughes is still on the board. I'm like, yeah, he's gone. And then they didn't pick him. And I was like, okay, Canucks, if they don't pick him, I'm shutting this off. And I'm like, but yeah, I'm happy they didn't.
Man. Would be some crazy stuff if there was if there was a deal for Quinn Hughes that involved Philip Zadina. That would be, some craziness.
Yeah. Well, there was talk about Zadina being a target, and I'm like, oh, that'd be funny that if he became part of the Canucks anyway. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. For the Canucks of trading anyone, I'm not sure who else is going. I think there will be a few more. I don't know if the Red Wings will be involved in any of them. Maybe.
I do want to throw one more thing out there. I don't know if this is super logical, especially given where they're at right now with who they have and who they have coming up. But depending on what Vancouver was looking for Thatcher Demko, that's a player that I would be interested in because not to get on a super long tangent here, but like the Red Wings have bet on Alex Nedeljkovic and Ville Husso over the last 2 seasons. And I think what we've seen is that both are capable, but not like Vezina quality. They're not even like, they're too inconsistent. I think Husso, he's started to bounce back before the break, so I'm not willing to write him off yet. And I don't even want to write off Nedeljkovic either, but I think it's clear that they aren't like 60 game season types of guys, whereas Demko has showed in the past he's that type of guy. I don't know that he makes a ton of sense for the Red Wings, especially considering they have Kosa coming up, but if the price was right, that's a player that I'd be willing to bet on because I think that Demko is a lot better than what he's shown this season in particular.
I wouldn't mind the Red Wings going after Thatcher Demko too. Looks like he signed for I think 3 more years after this one for $5 million. Him and Billy Husso together making just under, I think, what is it, $9 million? That's pretty good. That's a solid tandem. I mean, from a talent perspective, that's outstanding. But from a salary cap management perspective, like if you're spending maybe or probably less than 12% of the cap on goalies, that's pretty good. I mean, it's
at that point you're selling the fact that the cap's going up soon.
Yes. Personally, I don't want the Canucks trading Demko. I don't like the thought of it because of how he's under such a great contract right now. And I don't know what the Canucks are thinking their goaltending will be without him. I mean, unless you're getting someone in the trade that you're going to replace him with, I don't see it. I don't really think it's a good plan unless you're thinking you're going to be, you have someone in the system that you have a lot of faith in. So we'll see how that all plays out. All right. Well, let's get to our second off the rush set of questions here before we end the show. And this one I've centered around the draft because that's the next big event after the trade deadline. And unfortunately, it'll be the next big event for the Red Wings and won't be the playoffs. But start with you, Devin. Looking towards this draft, who do you see as Yzerman's Marco Kasper, Moritz Seider? Those guys that no one really expects him to pick, but does. I guess it all depends on where he picks too. But
so like my immediate answer to this is like one of the top guys because you wouldn't expect the Red Wings to be up there, but like they win the lottery and they pick Leo Carlsson and that's like the perfect pick for them. I wouldn't be surprised to see them if they're in the right spot. Go after Reinbacher because he is a right-handed defenseman, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And that's like one of the glaring weaknesses of the Red Wings prospect pool right now. And depending on how he goes the rest of the year and depending on where the Red Wings are picking, that's kind of a sneaky guy I could see him going after. And Seider was kind of a sneaky right-handed defenseman that he snagged way earlier than people thought. So for the purpose of this question, I'll say David Reinbacher as the guy that maybe comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I see it actually. Tony, what do you think?
You know what? I called my shot earlier in the year, and I don't think this is out of left field, but Dalibor Dvorsky, Red Wings picking at 10 to 12. I called it, and I'd like to see it come to fruition here.
Yeah, that'd be a good pick for the Red Wings too. I can see that being an Yzerman pick as well. All right. Well, second question, another one of the draft. And this is, you alluded to it, Devin. I start with you, Tony. If the Red Wings somehow ended up winning the lottery, not the first overall pick, so not Connor Bedard, because that'd be too easy.
Yeah.
They got the second overall pick. So you got a few guys that they could choose. One of them, Leo Carlsson. Who do they choose? Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlsson, or does he go and pick Matvei Michkov? And I mean, he's played with Datsuk. He knows Russian players. So what do you think? Any three of those guys on the board, who does Yzerman pick?
That's a great question. Because you have Carlsson, who's the obvious Swedish connection with all the Red Wings, have done in the past, 30 years, drafting out of Sweden with Håkan Andersson there. Then you got Fantilli, who's at the University of Michigan, who's right in their back door. And then you got Michkov, who is, an undeniable talent, but there's the Russian factor in it as well. If I had to guess who he would pick at number 2, it would be Michkov, just because going off of talent alone, Yzerman showed that last year picking Dmitry Pichelnikov, that, there's, these players will come over eventually. Things in the world may be different in 5 years, hopefully for the better, of course. It may take time for Michkov to come to North America, but when he does, it'll be well worth the wait.
Yeah. Hey, Devin, what do you think? Who does Yzerman pick of those three if they actually end up getting the second overall pick?
Well, quick answer I'm gonna say would be Fantilli or yeah, you see, even now I'm not even sure. I'll say Fantilli because yeah. But because there's a lot of talk about how Larkin's probably not going to be the top center when they're winning Stanley Cups. And there's some merit to that argument. And if you add an Adam Fantilli to your system, well, that's who's going to be the top center when you're winning Stanley Cups, right? That kind of gives you a roadmap forward. But I will say I would not, if they had the second overall pick, I would not write off the possibility that they do go Michkov. I actually think that the Red Wings are the type of team that would be perfect for the Red Wings because they don't need Michkov or whoever they pick to come over right away. If Michkov takes 3 years to play over in Russia, then he decides to come over, great. By that point, the Red Wings will be a playoff team. And then they'll add Michkov and take them to a whole nother level. It will honestly, the best comparison I think of when I think of this is the Minnesota Wild having Kaprizov in their system for like 5 years or something like that. And then as soon as they finally got him in Minnesota, they're now the team that we know them as today. They, like overnight, Kaprizov transformed that team. I think Michkov would do the exact same thing if he lands in the right spot.
I agree. I think that's the team that will pick him or is a team that can wait. Teams that need a guy like that right away or somewhat right away won't pick him because they just can't wait that long. But we'll have to see. That's a big storyline, I think, going into this draft is where Michkov gets picked. Because if there was all those circumstances were gone, he'd be second overall pick. I mean, that's just 1,000% hands down. Even though Adam Fantilli is amazing, I think Michkov is a second overall pick without any of the other stuff.
I have this sneaking suspicion that he's going to fall out of the top 5 and maybe even out of the top 10, and he's going to become like the biggest draft steal of the decade because the kid's uber talented. And there's going to be some teams that are scared away by the geopolitics of it all. And I get it, but you can't pass on that talent if you're in a position where you need that talent.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a little bit longer of a quick fire or whatever off the rush question. I did not put any rules on that. I'm the new host here, so it was just fire. It wasn't really quick fire. If people have watched shows I've hosted in the past, quick fires never means quick fire, so should call it something else. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of another grind line here at the Hockey Writers. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Devin, for joining me on my first time in the host chair. Hopefully we don't get a bunch of comments and that say I shouldn't be here. So, all right. Leave comments on anything.
But do leave comments.
Do leave comments. I know you guys aren't shy. So, give us some comments on what you think the Red Wings will do at the deadline. I mean, they'll probably do something, either buy, either sell. I don't think Yzerman's sitting out this deadline. He's got some things to move. I think he will be doing some stuff. So give us your thoughts of what you think. And, thanks for joining us on another grind line, new era here. We'll have a bunch of other guests. Of course, we'll have Logan and Delaney back at some point, back on the show. And Tony, of course, you're always welcome anytime you're available. You've got a locker room, of course, a locker stall at the grind line always.
Love it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, make sure you're hitting that like button and subscribe to the Hockey Writers YouTube channel. There's lots of shows going on. Now we've got trade deadline shows coming up after the trade deadline, and any of the big trades that are happening, we'll have quick reaction videos right after as well. So if the Red Wings do make a trade, we'll be on here talking about it. So make sure you're checking out the YouTube channel. You're checking out thehockeywriters.com. Lots of trade deadline coverage there. And, from Tony, from Devin, it's Matthew Zator, and we'll see you next time on another grind line.